Mark Green joins me now. Congressman, great to have you here. Let's dive right in. The reintroduction of the Cyber Pivot Act.
Well, thank you for having me on and for highlighting this. I think a big part of my responsibility is to just help educate the American people on this threat, cybersecurity as a threat, and the shortages that we have as a nation, the weak points, in contending in cyberspace with China and the other bad actors. So thank you. This is huge.
Well, it is, as some have referred to it, that fifth space of warfare in some form, and whether it be in the war space, or which I'm sure you're familiar with, but also in the world we live in, it's important, and it's not separate from each other. It's not as if corporations are separate from individuals that are separate from military. So walk us through this point by point, if you will, on what the key threats are and what the goal is with the Cyber Pivot Act.
Yeah, we released, actually, David, this week, it was actually yesterday, 60 acts of espionage by the Chinese Communist Party over the last 4 years inside the United States. And, of course, the spy balloon is probably the thing that's most notable to people. It was played out on national television. But, intrusions into our infrastructure. So imagine that the Chinese have access to your water system, your power system, all of that. They infiltrated our infrastructure. They infiltrated our telephones. They got into all of the telecommunications networks. That was, you hear this typhoon, and it sort of, we say Volt Typhoon or Salt Typhoon based on whomever they intrude into. Silk Typhoon, they got into the U.S. Treasury Department. I mean, this is, honestly, if you could visualize them being in our Verizon or AT&T cell towers with the ability to disrupt our telecommunications, it would really be no different than the Russians planting a satchel charge to blow the tower up. Yet Americans and most people don't equate the two. And so China wants to unseat the United States as the global hegemon. And it goes all the way back to the Qin dynasty, and Xi Jinping is acting more like the emperor of the Qin dynasty than any other in the history of China, which is just brute force and bullying, and he's a totalitarian dictator. And so they believe very firmly in the Sun Tzu Art of War philosophy of there can be only one tiger on top of the mountain. And they're working aggressively on multiple strategic levels to unseat us. And so being in our cybersecurity or in our systems, if we go and try to defend Taiwan, an invasion of Taiwan, they can just call us up and say, well, we're about to shut down all your water, or we're about to shut down all your power. You might want to rethink that. That is a chip, so to speak. That is a military tool at that point. And so cyber defense is critical. The greatest need in cyber defense is a workforce, because we're 500,000 people short. Empty slots in cybersecurity today. Tomorrow it'll be more. And so that's why I introduced the Pivot Act. The threat, and now the response is the Cyber Pivot Act, step one.
So two things come to mind as I listen to you walk us through this. One is, in the form of a question, what does a resilient cyber posture look like? What does that framework look like? And also, in order to get to that point, and to your point about not having enough people in the space, enough experts, what type of education track do we need to get the population there so that they're able to do the job you're talking about?
So my cell phone blinked out there just a second, David. I hate to ask you this, but could you ask that question again?
Two things. No, that's all right. That's technology, and we are talking about cyber. Maybe they're listening to us. One, what does a resilient cyber posture look like, given your answer? And the people that are the numbers that we need, we're short on the workforce component. What type of education track do we need to focus on to get to having the personnel capable of getting us to that resilient cyber posture?
You know, the resilience looks like systems and people. CISA is in Department of Homeland Security, and we've been building up that entity to defend the .gov, as well as to partner with private industry to, build their resilience. The challenge is that in the United States, we've had the perspective that private industry takes care of itself, government takes care of itself. Unfortunately, when it's a nation state, even entities as big as Microsoft, Colonial Pipeline, all these huge companies, they can't defend themselves against a nation state. And so the government has got to be more involved. So we're doing a paradigm shift there. We're building up CISA to be able to do that job. Meanwhile, we're short people, right? So resilience looks like systems and people. The greatest shortage is the people, and education is the key. So, but what we don't need is necessarily a 4-year degree in cyber. I mean, this is a technical thing. You can take a 2-year degree and become a cyber defender, right? So this PIVOT Act provides for, it's very similar to ROTC. You know, a lot of people understand you basically get your college paid for, you pay the government back by serving in the military X number of years, and there's a positive ROI for the government. And so we're doing this with cyber. A kid or a mid-career professional says, I want to flip pivot to a different career, and they go and get a 2-year degree. We pay for it. They just have to go and serve in government. And they pay us back that way. It costs us about $200,000 roughly to pay for a specialist. So we can quickly pay back a 2-year degree if we're making that person a GS, let's say 15 or 13 or 14, whatever. And that's a huge savings. We pay back that investment, or the individual pays back that investment, and then they're free to go work in the private sector and make the big bucks for themselves, as well as, defending our systems. Because what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of our infrastructure is private companies. Now, they're public-private partnerships, but a lot of that infrastructure, whether it be a power, Westinghouse and a nuclear power plant in Georgia or whatever, right? Those things are private companies. So I like to think of it a lot like the GI Bill. Remember, guys would come home from war, they'd get their degree, and then they'd go out and enhance the economic prosperity of this country. I see this as something very similar to that, an opportunity to make a huge difference for the entire country, but initially in that payback period, protecting the government.
My guest, Congressman Mark Green from Tennessee 7th District, Chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security, the reintroduction of the Cyber PIVOT Act. Partnerships, private partnerships, public-private partnerships, education, and more. And to your point that, you don't need that 4-year degree, is there a way or a path to engage Silicon Valley? And we have a number of them, of course, the big one in California, but the tech sector writ large in this country, because this is a workforce that benefits them, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. They have been incredibly supportive and positive about this. The old icons of IBM, coming out saying that they support it, and the new players on the market, relatively new players on the market like Palo Alto Networks and Avanti, which are solely focused on cybersecurity. In fact, we're going to do what we call a field hearing, where we pick up the entire committee. We're going to take it to Palo Alto, California, and we're going to tour some cybersecurity-specific companies, and then we're going to hold a hearing on cybersecurity and how we better defend this nation. That's going to happen, I think, right after Memorial Day, that week after Memorial Day. So This is my number one after the southern border, and the president's pretty much taking care of the southern border. So we're focusing on the cyber border, and my job is to do everything I can to make sure it's as solid as it possibly can be.
Maximizing American human capital. That's a fancy way of saying let's get those kids educated, let's get people educated, and in some cases there are those who might want to switch into another aspect of their career or a new career. All things that we need, and given the numbers that you've said, where we're short, we literally are working at a deficit against our enemies around the world. Our friends, okay, that's a different story, but we should be concerned about our enemies. Congressman, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, David.